The ceremonial bonfire roared toward the heavens, its flames painting the night sky crimson and gold. 300 unmated wolves circled the sacred grounds, their anticipation thick enough to taste. The mating ceremony of the blood moon, the one night every decade when the moon goddess herself was said to choose fated pairs. Alexa pressed her forehead against the cold stone pillar at the edge of the clearing, her entire body trembling. 4 days. It had been 4 days since her stepmother had locked her in the cellar with nothing but rats for company and rainwater seeping through the cracks. Discipline, Madame Greaves had called it, for the unforgivable sin of being her late father's bastard daughter. "You need to sit down," Nina hissed, gripping Alexa's elbow. "If Elder Moira sees you like this, or she'll tell your stepmother you embarrassed the household." Alexa forced herself upright, though black spots danced across her vision. Through the flickering firelight, she could see them, the elite wolves of the 5 territories, dressed in ceremonial silks, their eyes bright with hope and hunger as they waited for the mating bonds to snap into place. She was not one of them. She was nothing. A servant forced to attend in case the household needed something. A shadow permitted to exist only at the edges. "Just hold on until the bonding ritual ends," Nina whispered. "Then I'll sneak you some food from the feast tables." "Omega!" Elder Moira's voice cracked like a whip across the clearing. "The offering bowls need to be placed at the Alpha's feet. Or now." Alexa's hands shook as she lifted the heavy bronze bowl filled with sacred herbs and moonflower petals. The weight of it sent her knees buckling. "1 step. Just take 1 step," she muttered. The ceremonial circle stretched before her like an impossible distance. Unmated wolves parted around her without looking, their focus locked on the bonfire, on each other, on anything but the exhausted Omega stumbling through their ranks. She was halfway to the raised platform when she felt it, a scorching awareness crawling up her spine like wildfire. Someone was watching her, not a casual glance, but a predatory focus that made every instinct in her body scream. Against every survival instinct she possessed, Alexa lifted her gaze, and her world shattered. He stood at the center of the platform, elevated above all others on a dais of black stone, not the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. She had heard stories of him. Carl M. Hayes, the wolf who had claimed the crown at 23 through a challenge that left 12 Alphas dead. The king who ruled the 5 territories with an iron fist and had never taken a mate, never even shown interest in the ceremony. The stories had not prepared her for the reality. He was built like violence made flesh, all sharp angles and brutal strength, his presence so commanding that even the bonfire seemed to dim in comparison. Black hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes, God's his eyes, glowed molten amber in the firelight, fixed on her with an intensity that burned straight through her chest. Why is he staring at me? The thought scattered as her vision tunneled. The bronze bowl grew impossibly heavy. Her legs gave out without warning, and the bowl tumbled from her grip. She never hit the ground. Arms caught her, powerful, impossibly fast, wrapping around her waist and pulling her against a body that radiated heat like a living furnace. The bowl crashed somewhere distant, herbs and petals exploding across the sacred earth. But Alexa barely registered it. All she could feel was him. The overwhelming strength of the arms banded around her, the thundering heartbeat against her cheek, the scent of pine and smoke, and something wild that made her wolf whimper and bare her throat. "I've got you." The voice was gravel, rumbling through her entire body. Alexa forced her eyes open and found herself staring directly into molten gold. The Alpha King held her. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories had moved from his platform faster than any wolf should move. It crossed 30 feet of sacred ground in the space between heartbeats and caught a half-starved Omega before she could hit the earth. The entire ceremony had frozen. 300 wolves stood silent, watching their unmated king cradle a servant in his arms. "Your Majesty," Elder Moira's voice cracked with panic. "Forgive this disgrace. The girl will be severely punished. I will remove her from your presence immediately." No. The word was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute command. Alexa felt his arms tighten around her, pulling her closer against his chest. "Your Majesty, she has disrupted the sacred ceremony. She stays." His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "With me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Madame Greaves pushed through the circle, her face pale. "Alpha King, please. This Omega is my stepdaughter, or she is my responsibility. She stays with me." Each word landed like a death sentence. Alexa tried to speak, tried to tell him this was a mistake, that she was nobody, that he needed to let her go before this got worse. But his hand cradled the back of her head, and his next words were spoken low enough that only she could hear them. "I'm not letting you go, little Omega. Not now. Not ever." The bonfire roared higher, and Alexa felt something snap into place in her chest, a golden thread she'd never felt before, binding her to the wolf who refused to release her. "Oh gods. No." Elder Moira's voice trembled. "But Your Majesty, if you don't participate in the bonding ritual, the ceremony cannot be completed." Carl's eyes never left Alexa's face as he spoke, his words echoing across the silent clearing. "The moon goddess has already chosen for me." Before we continue with the story of a servant girl and the ruthless Alpha, please tell us your name and where you are watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Chapter 1. The world tilted violently, and Alexa felt herself falling. The sacred crystal chalice, the one Elder Moira had thrust into her hands at the last moment, the one worth more than Alexa's entire life, slipped from her fingers. She watched it tumble in slow motion, the moonlight refracting through its ancient facets as it fell. She never hit the ground. Arms caught her, strong, impossibly fast, wrapping around her waist before she could fall. The chalice shattered somewhere distant, crystal exploding across sacred stone like fallen stars. But Alexa barely registered it. All she could feel was heat, searing, overwhelming heat radiating from the body pressed against hers. "I have you." The voice was low, rough, resonating through her chest like thunder. Alexa forced her eyes open and found herself staring directly into molten gold. The Alpha King held her. Carl M. Hayes had moved from his platform faster than any wolf should be able to move, crossed 30 feet of ceremonial ground in the space between heartbeats, and caught a starving Omega before she could shatter along with the crystal. "Your Majesty!" Elder Moira's voice cracked with panic. "Forgive this disgrace. The girl will be severely punished. I will remove her from your presence immediately." "You will not touch her." The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of absolute command. The entire clearing had fallen silent. 300 wolves stood frozen, watching their king cradle a servant in his arms. "Sire," Elder Moira's voice trembled, "the broken chalice, it's a curse upon the ceremony." "I said," Carl repeated, his golden eyes never leaving Alexa's face, "you will not touch her." Alexa's heart hammered against her ribs. This close, she could see the way his pupils had dilated, consuming the gold until only thin rings remained. His nostrils flared, and she watched shock cross his expression, then recognition, then something darker she couldn't name. "What is your name?" he demanded. "Alexa." The word came out as barely a whisper. Alexa D. Garcia. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Garcia, the fallen house. The bloodline that had been stripped of its standing 12 years ago, when her father died under mysterious circumstances. Alexa. The king spoke her name like he was tasting it, testing its weight on his tongue. His arm tightened around her waist. When did you last eat? The question was so unexpected that she answered honestly. 4 days ago, Your Majesty. Something dangerous flashed in those golden eyes. Alexa felt his chest vibrate against her, a growl, low and barely contained. Who is responsible for this girl? His voice rang through the silent clearing. The crowd parted, and Madame Greaves stepped forward, her face pale beneath its powder. I am her guardian, Your Majesty, her stepmother. I assure you, this display is entirely her own doing. You starved her. It was not a question. Madame Greaves's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. Your Majesty, she is merely being dramatic. I have given her every. I can smell the lie on your breath. The clearing erupted in whispers. The Alpha King's ability to detect falsehood was legendary, but to use it so publicly, to humiliate a noble before the entire court. This girl, Carl continued, his voice dropping to something cold and lethal, is not leaving my sight tonight, or any night hereafter. Alexa's heart stopped. What? Madame Greaves sputtered. You cannot simply take my ward. I am your king. Carl finally looked away from Alexa, fixing his golden stare on her stepmother with predatory focus. I can do whatever I wish. And I wish for this woman to remain under my protection. On what grounds? Madame Greaves demanded, desperation cracking her composure. The Alpha King smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was on the grounds that she is my stellar mate. The word crashed through Alexa like a wave, drowning out the gasps of the crowd, the pounding of her own heart, everything except the impossible declaration echoing through the sacred grounds. Stellar mate. Impossible! Someone shouted. Others took up the cry. The stellar bond, the rarest pairing in 1,000 generations, ordained by the moon goddess herself. She locked her in the cellar. A small voice cut through the chaos. Nina stepped forward, trembling but steady. 4 days. No food. No water. Just rats and darkness. Carl went utterly still. Alexa opened her mouth to protest, to demand an explanation, but darkness was already creeping at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness claimed her was the Alpha King's face above hers, golden eyes blazing with fierce possession and something that looked terrifyingly like triumph. Alexa woke to silk. The sensation was so foreign that for a moment she simply lay there, her cheek pressed against fabric, softer than anything she had ever touched. Then memory returned in a flood. The ceremony, the fall, the king's arms around her, his voice declaring. She bolted upright, her heart slamming against her ribs. The chamber surrounding her was larger than the entire servants' quarters she had shared with Nina. Moonlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows draped in silver damask, illuminating walls painted with scenes of wolves running through midnight forests. The bed beneath her was a vast ocean of white linens and furs, large enough to fit 10 people comfortably. You're awake. Alexa's gaze snapped to the corner of the room. A woman sat in a high-backed chair, her silver hair coiled atop her head, her weathered face kind despite its sharp angles. She wore the deep blue robes of a royal healer. Where am I? Alexa's voice came out rusty, her throat raw. The King's Tower, the woman replied, rising to pour water from a crystal pitcher. I am Vera, His Majesty's personal physician. You've been unconscious for nearly 16 hours. 16 hours, Alexa pressed a hand to her forehead, fighting the dizziness that still swam through her. The king said. Vera paused, her expression troubled. Drink first. Then questions. Vera pressed the glass into her hands. The water was cold and clean, and Alexa had to force herself not to gulp it down like a starving animal. Her stomach cramped painfully, reminding her of its emptiness. Small sips, Vera cautioned. Your body needs time to remember how to process food. She lifted a silver tray from the bedside table, revealing broth and bread. Eat slowly. The king was very specific about your care. Alexa's hands trembled around the glass. Why am I here? Why did he say that I... The door opened without warning. Alexa felt him before she saw him. That same prickling awareness she had experienced at the ceremony, the sensation of being pinned by an invisible force. Then Carl M. Hayes stepped into the chamber, and all the air left her lungs. He had changed from his ceremonial attire into simpler clothing. Black trousers, nor a dark shirt open at the collar. But he looked no less dangerous. If anything, the casual dress emphasized the predatory power coiled in every line of his body. Leave us, he said to Vera. The healer bowed and departed without a word. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded to Alexa like the ceiling of a tomb. You should be eating. The king's gaze dropped to the untouched tray. Vera will be displeased. Why am I here? The question burst out before Alexa could stop it. She clutched the glass tightly, using it as an anchor against the trembling that threatened to overtake her body. Carl moved closer. Each step was measured, deliberate, like a wolf approaching prey he didn't wish to startle. Chapter 2. Carl stopped at the edge of the bed, close enough that Alexa had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. While you're here, he said quietly. Because you're mine. I don't belong to anyone. The words came out shakier than she intended. Your wolf says otherwise. He reached down and took the glass from her trembling hands, setting it aside. When I caught you, what did you feel? Heat flooded her cheeks. Nothing. Liar. His hand cupped her jaw, thumb brushing across her lower lip. I felt it too, the bond snapping into place. The recognition. Alexa jerked back. You're mistaken. I'm nobody, just a servant, a low-rank Omega. You're a stellar mate. Carl's eyes blazed gold. My stellar mate, and you're coming with me to the palace. Tonight. I can't just leave. Your stepmother locked you in a cellar for 4 days. His voice dropped to something dangerous. She starved you, beat you, and those are only the crimes I can smell on your skin. What else did she do, Alexa? Tears burned behind her eyes. She looked away. The door burst open. Baron Silas, Madame Greaves's brother, stormed into the chamber, flanked by 6 guards. His face was purple with rage, his hand on his sword hilt. This is an outrage, he roared. You cannot simply abduct a member of my household. I can do whatever I wish. Carl didn't even turn to look at him. I'm the king. She is bound to the Greaves family by blood debt. Silas's voice cracked with desperation. Her father owed us everything before he died. She belongs to us by law. Carl went utterly still. Then he turned, and Alexa had never seen anything more terrifying than the smile on his face. The Garcia family, he said softly. It owes nothing to the people who murdered her father. The room exploded into chaos. Silas drew his sword. 4 guards collapsed, screaming, clawing at their throats as black veins spread across their skin. Vera pressed herself against the wall, eyes wide with horror. How did you... Silas's weapon clattered to the floor. That's impossible. I had his body exhumed 6 hours ago. Carl's voice was calm, conversational. The poison was still in his bones. Nightshade and silver, mixed with wolfsbane to make it look like natural causes. His eyes blazed pure gold. "Your sister confessed everything before dawn." Alexa couldn't breathe. "My father was murdered." Carl's attention snapped back to her, his expression softening. "I'm sorry. I would have told you gently, but—" He gestured at Silas, whose remaining guards were dragging him backward toward the door. "This isn't over," Silas spat. "She's pack property. Blood debt cannot be broken. It can, when the debt was built on murder and fraud." Carl moved toward Alexa, gathering her into his arms despite her protests. "And it especially can, when the woman in question is my stellar mate." He carried her past Silas, past the convulsing guards, down the tower stairs toward a carriage waiting in the courtyard. Alexa's mind spun. Her father, murdered, 12 years of lies, and this man, this king, claiming she belonged to him. Carl settled her inside the carriage and sat across from her. The door closed, the wheels began to move, and then she felt it. Heat, sudden, overwhelming, erupting from somewhere deep in her chest. Her skin flushed, her breath caught. To something inside her, something that had been sleeping her entire life, woke. "What?" she gasped, pressing her hands against the velvet cushions. "What's happening?" Carl leaned forward, his eyes glowing in the darkness. The first pull. When stellar mates are alone together for the first time, the bond awakens what was hidden. Power exploded through Alexa's veins. Her canines lengthened, her vision sharpened. Her wolf surged forward, stronger than it had ever been. Her bones began to crack. "Carl!" She could barely speak through the sensation. "I'm just an Omega. This can't be." His smile was fierce, possessive, triumphant. "You were never an Omega, Alexa." He reached out as her eyes began to glow gold. "You're an Alpha, and your power has been locked away since the night they murdered your father." Alexa's scream turned into a roar as her true nature exploded free. Chapter 3. The carriage door exploded outward. Alexa stumbled onto cobblestones, her body still crackling with power, her eyes blazing gold. Guards surrounded them instantly. 20 wolves in royal armor, weapons drawn, but they froze when they saw their king. Carl stepped down behind her, his hand finding the small of her back. "Stand down. She's with me." "Your Majesty." A silver-haired woman in healer's robes hurried forward, her eyes widening at Alexa. "What happened to her? Her aura, it's awakening." Carl's voice was tight. "Get Grand Physician Corwin. Now." They swept Alexa through marble corridors into a chamber filled with strange instruments and glass vials. But the Grand Physician, an ancient wolf with milky eyes, appeared within minutes. "Lay her on the table," he commanded, "face down." Carl helped Alexa onto the cold surface. Her body still trembled with aftershocks of power, her wolf pacing restlessly beneath her skin. Corwin's hands hovered over her back, glowing with pale blue light. "Remove her dress. I need to see her spine." Alexa tensed, but Carl's fingers were gentle as he unfastened the tattered fabric, peeling it away from her shoulders. Corwin's gasp cut through the room like a blade. "Impossible," he breathed. "Your Majesty, look!" Carl moved to see, and Alexa heard his sharp intake of breath. "What?" She tried to turn. "What is it?" "Binding runes." Corwin's voice shook. "Ancient, tattooed in invisible ink across her entire spine. I've only seen this once before, or in texts from the Solar Walker extinction." "The Solar Walkers died out 200 years ago," Carl said slowly. "Not all of them, apparently." Corwin traced the air above her back, his magic making symbols glow silver against her skin. "These runes are parasitic. They've been draining her life force since childhood, siphoning her power to—" He stopped. "Gods above." "To what?" Carl's voice was deadly quiet. To the Iron Claw Pack's territory markers. Corwin looked up, his milky eyes wide with horror. Her power has been feeding their lands for 12 years. That's why the Iron Claw territory has flourished while every other pack struggles. They've been using a solar walker as a living battery. Silence crashed through the chamber. The Greaves family serves Iron Claw, Carl said softly. They murdered her father, took her in as a servant, and bound her power to fuel their alpha's territory. Not just any alpha. Corwin's hands trembled as he traced another symbol. Your Majesty, these runes require royal blood to activate. Whoever placed them had access to... The door exploded inward. A man stood in the doorway, wreathed in silver flame, his eyes glowing with stolen power. Alpha Darius of Iron Claw, the most powerful alpha in the 5 territories. The man who had been feeding off Alexa's stolen strength for 12 years. "Give her back," Darius snarled, his voice echoing with unnatural power. "She's mine." Carl's eyes went black. "She was never yours. Without her power, my territory will collapse." Darius's hands erupted with silver fire, Alexa's fire, her stolen magic burning in his veins. "Without her, I'm nothing. So I'll take her back, even if I have to kill a king to do it." He lunged, and Alexa felt the runes on her spine activate, chains of magic wrapping around her heart, trying to drag her toward him. Chapter 4. Carl moved faster than sight. One moment Darius was lunging forward, wreathed in stolen silver fire. The next, Carl's hand was through his chest, gripping his heart. "You don't get to touch her," Carl said quietly. "Ever again." He ripped the heart free. Darius collapsed, his stolen power erupting outward in a shockwave that shattered every window in the chamber. The binding runes on Alexa's spine flared white-hot, then went dark. The magical chains around her heart dissolved like smoke. She gasped, her body suddenly feeling lighter than it had in 12 years. "It's over," Carl said, dropping the still beating heart onto the floor. Corwin, "Burn those runes off her, now!" The physician worked quickly, his magic searing through the parasitic symbols. Each one that burned away released a flood of power back into Alexa's body. By the time he finished, she was glowing. "Your Majesty," Corwin whispered, "her aura, it's..." "I know." Carl lifted Alexa into his arms, cradling her against his chest. "She's a solar walker, the last of her bloodline, and she's mine." 3 days later, Carl declared a month-long celebration. "To honor my stellar mate," he announced to the assembled court, his hand wrapped possessively around Alexa's waist. "The future queen of the Northern Territories." Alexa stood beside him in silk and diamonds, still struggling to believe this was real, that she wasn't a servant anymore. Or that the man beside her was claiming her before hundreds of nobles who had ignored her existence for years. "I don't understand," she whispered that night, as Carl led her onto the moonlit balcony. Music drifted up from the ballroom below. "Why all this? The celebration, the declarations, because you've spent your entire life being told you're worthless." His hands found her waist, pulling her into a waltz. "I'm showing you the truth." "What truth?" "That you're extraordinary." His voice was rough. "That you deserve to be treasured, protected, worshipped." Heat flooded her cheeks. "I'm not." "You are." He spun her, and she gasped as her back pressed against his chest, his arms crossing over her waist. "This is called the gentling, an ancient tradition where an alpha proves to his mate that she's safe, that she matters." Alexa's breath caught. "How long does it last?" "As long as it takes." His lips brushed her temple. "Until you believe you're mine. Until you understand that I would burn the world to keep you safe." Something warm bloomed in her chest. The bond between them pulsed, golden and alive, and her skin began to glow. Soft, golden light radiated from her arms, her shoulders, spreading across her body like bioluminescent fire. Carl's breath hitched against her neck. "Alexa," he whispered, "you're—" A scream cut through the night. They spun toward the ballroom. Through the windows, Alexa could see nobles collapsing, clawing at their throats. Black veins spread across their skin like poison. And standing in the center of the chaos, wreathed in darkness, was a woman Alexa recognized. Madame Greaves. But her stepmother's eyes were no longer human. They glowed with ancient, malevolent power. And when she spoke, her voice echoed with something far older than her body. "Did you really think killing Darius would end this?" She smiled, and her teeth were black. He was just a pawn, and now that the Solar Walker has awakened, her gaze locked on Alexa's glowing form. The real hunters are coming. Chapter 5. Carl's guards descended on Madame Greaves, but she dissolved into shadow before they could reach her. Her voice echoed through the ballroom as the darkness dispersed. 7 days. That's all the time you have before they arrive. Then she was gone. The nobles who had collapsed began to stir, gasping, the black veins fading from their skin. But the damage was done. Word of the attack spread through the territories like wildfire. By dawn, because the Council of Alphas had demanded an emergency meeting, Alexa stood beside Carl's throne in the council chamber, her hands clenched in the folds of her silk gown. 6 Alphas sat around the massive marble table, their expressions ranging from hostile to openly disgusted. "This is madness!" Alpha Garrett of the Western Peaks snarled. "You cannot expect us to accept a servant girl as our queen." "She is my stellar mate." Carl's voice was ice. "You will address her with respect." "Respect?" Alpha Callista of the River Clans laughed bitterly. "She's human passing, Your Majesty. Look at her. Weak, small, no visible power. How can someone like that lead the 5 territories?" "She's not even pack-born," Alpha Thorn added, his lip curling. The Garcia bloodline was always suspect. "My father was murdered by people you allied with." Alexa's voice cut through the chamber, sharp and clear. "So forgive me if I don't value your opinion of my bloodline." Garrett slammed his fist on the table. "Know your place, girl. You're only here because the king is obsessed." "Watch your mouth," Carl growled. But Alexa stepped forward, her anger building like pressure behind her ribs. "No." Her hands trembled. "Let him speak. Let them all say what they really think." "Fine." Callista leaned back, her smile cruel. "You're a pretty ornament, a plaything for a king who should have chosen a true alpha as his mate. You have no power, no presence, no—" Something inside Alexa snapped. Golden light exploded from her body. The marble table between them erupted into flames, not red flames, but pure solar fire, white-hot and blinding. The massive slab of stone melted like wax, pooling onto the floor in molten rivers. The Alphas threw themselves backward, shouting in shock and terror. Alexa stared at her hands, wreathed in golden flames that didn't burn her skin. I didn't mean—" "Solar fire," Thorn whispered, his face ash-white. "She has solar fire." The chamber fell deathly silent. Carl's hand found Alexa's shoulder, grounding her. The flames flickered and died. "Any other objections to my mate's qualifications?" No one spoke. Then the doors burst open. A messenger stumbled in, his face pale with terror. "Your Majesty." His voice cracked. "The borders, all 5 territorial borders, they're—" "Spit it out," Carl commanded. "They're on fire, black fire, and there are things coming through the flames." The messenger's hands shook. "Things that haven't walked this world in 200 years. Alexa felt ice flood her veins. What things? The messenger met her eyes, and she saw her death reflected there. Shadow walkers, my lady, the ancient enemies of your bloodline. His voice dropped to a whisper. They've come to finish what they started. Chapter 6. The War Council convened immediately. Maps spread across the replacement table, hastily brought in after Alexa had incinerated the first one. Red markers showed where the black fires burned at each border. Carl's hand never left Alexa's waist as he issued commands, sending battalions to each breach point. But she could feel the tension radiating from him, see the way his jaw clenched when he thought she wasn't looking. Your Majesty, Alpha Garrett said, carefully, his earlier hostility replaced with fear. If the Shadow Walkers have truly returned, we need to evacuate the capital. No. Carl's voice was absolute. We hold the line. We protect our people. The meeting stretched into hours. Alexa's head pounded, exhaustion creeping through her bones, despite the power still humming beneath her skin. When Carl finally dismissed the council, she retreated to her chambers, desperate for silence. She found someone waiting. A woman stood by the window, draped in silver and shadow, her beauty sharp enough to cut. Her eyes, one gold, one black, fixed on Alexa with predatory focus. Hello, little solar walker. Her voice was honey and poison. I'm Lady Morgana. We have much to discuss. Alexa's hand flew to the door handle, but it wouldn't turn. Locked by magic. Oh, don't be afraid, Morgana smiled. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to save you. From what? From him. Morgana gestured toward the door, toward where Carl was still strategizing with his generals. From the king who only wants you for your power. That's not true, isn't it? Morgana circled closer. 3 days ago, you were a starving servant. Now you're his precious mate. Tell me, did he show any interest in you before your power awakened? Before you started glowing with solar fire? Alexa's chest tightened. He caught me when I fell, because he smelled your dormant power. Morgana's voice was almost gentle. The stellar bond doesn't just happen randomly, child. It forms between wolves of equal strength. He couldn't bond with you when you were weak. But the moment your power broke free... She snapped her fingers. Suddenly you're his fated mate. Convenient, isn't it? You're lying. Am I? Morgana's mismatched eyes gleamed. Why do you think he had your father's body exhumed so quickly? Why do you think he knew exactly where to find evidence of murder? Because he's been tracking the Garcia bloodline for years, waiting for the last solar walker to awaken. Pain lanced through Alexa's chest, sharp, sudden, stealing her breath. The golden light beneath her skin flickered. What? She gasped. Soul fracture. Morgana's voice held false sympathy. When a stellar mate begins to doubt the bond, it fractures. And every fracture... Alexa's knees buckled. The light under her skin guttered like a dying flame. Agony ripped through her body, her veins burning with ice instead of fire. Brings you closer to death. The door exploded inward. Carl stood in the doorway, his eyes pure black with rage. But Alexa saw something else in his face when he looked at her flickering light. Panic. And she realized, if she died, so did her power. Morgana vanished in a swirl of shadow. Alexa! Carl reached for her. She flinched back. Don't. Her light went out completely, and the palace plunged into darkness as every torch, every candle, every source of light within a mile extinguished simultaneously. In the sudden black, something cold wrapped around Alexa's throat. Chapter 7. The cold around Alexa's throat tightened like a noose made of ice and shadow. She couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, could only claw at the invisible force strangling her. Get away from her! Karl's roar shook the walls. His power erupted, golden light blazing from his body, illuminating the darkness. The shadow around Alexa's throat hissed and retreated, but didn't release her completely. Karl lunged forward. The shadow lashed out, throwing him backward into the wall hard enough to crack stone. "If you touch her again," a voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere, "the darkness will crush her throat." Morgana's laughter echoed through the chamber. "So what will you do, Alpha King? Fight me and kill your mate, or watch her die slowly?" Alexa's vision was going dark at the edges. Her lungs burned. The soul fracture in her chest throbbed with every failed heartbeat. Then Karl did something she never expected. He fell to his knees. "Please," his voice cracked. "Take me instead." The shadow around Alexa's throat loosened slightly, enough for her to gasp in a single breath. "How touching," Morgana purred. "But I don't want you, King. I want her power." "You can't have it." Karl's hands pressed flat against the floor, his head bowed. "Because it was never about her power. Not for me." Alexa stared at him through tear-blurred eyes. "I didn't know what she was when I caught her," Karl continued, his voice raw. "I just knew that when she fell, my entire world stopped, that her scent, honey and starlight, made my wolf howl for the first time in 10 years, that holding her felt like coming home to something I'd been searching for my entire life." The shadow around Alexa's throat wavered. "I don't care if she's a solar walker, or a servant, or a goddess descended from the moon itself." Karl looked up, and Alexa saw tears tracking down his face. "I would have claimed her even if she had no power at all, because she's mine, and I'm hers." "Lies!" Morgana hissed, but her voice sounded uncertain. "Then let me prove it." Karl's hands moved to his collar, ripping open his shirt to expose his throat, the most vulnerable place on any wolf. "Alexa." His eyes found hers in the darkness, blazing with absolute conviction. "Mark me. Take my oath. Bind yourself to me not as a king to his queen, but as a wolf to his mate." His voice dropped to something fierce and desperate. "If I'm lying, if I only want your power, you'll know the moment your teeth touch my skin. The bond will show you my truth." "Don't listen to him." Morgana's shadows tightened again, but Alexa felt something shift in her chest. The soul fracture, it wasn't just doubt. It was fear. Fear that she wasn't worthy. Fear that no one could want her for herself. And Karl was offering her the one thing that would show her his soul. The shadow released her. Alexa collapsed forward, and Karl caught her, cradling her against his chest as they knelt together on the floor. "Do it," he whispered against her hair. "See my truth." Alexa's canines lengthened. Her trembling hands gripped his shoulders. She could feel his pulse thundering beneath her lips as she pressed her mouth to his throat. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "So am I." His arms tightened around her. "But I'm yours, Alexa. I've always been yours." She bit down. The bond exploded between them. Not just gold, but supernova bright, searing through every doubt, every lie, every fear. Alexa could feel everything Karl felt, the moment he'd caught her, and his world had tilted. The rage when he'd smelled her starvation, the terror when her light had flickered, the absolute, a bone-deep certainty that she was his, and he would die before letting her go. No calculation, no schemes, just pure, devastating devotion. And power. Oh gods, the power. The binding runes on Alexa's back, the ones Corwin had burned but not destroyed, the ones that had left scars, erupted with light. They didn't just shatter, they incinerated, turning to ash and gold that swirled around them like a storm. Alexa's true power, her full solar walker inheritance, detonated outward. The palace lit up like a second sun. Windows shattered. Walls cracked. Every wolf within 5 miles fell to their knees, blinded and overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of her unleashed strength. When the light finally faded, Alexa pulled back from Carl's throat. His blood, golden now, not red, dripped down her chin. The mark she'd left on his skin glowed like a brand, and she could feel it. Her power, all of it. Centuries of accumulated strength, no longer chained or drained or suppressed. She was a solar walker, the last of her kind, and she was magnificent. Carl stared at her with awe and hunger and fierce pride. "There you are." Then his eyes widened, looking past her shoulder. "Alexa," she turned. In the broken window stood a figure wreathed in black flame. Not Morgana. Someone. Something else. Its eyes were empty voids, and when it spoke, the voice was ancient and cold and utterly inhuman. "The awakening is complete. The hunt begins." It smiled with too many teeth. "Run, little son. Let's see how long you last." Chapter 8. The creature vanished in a swirl of black flame. Carl pulled Alexa to her feet, his hand finding hers. "We need to—" The sun went out. Not a cloud passing over, or not a gradual sunset. The sun simply ceased to exist, plunging the world into absolute darkness. Alexa's newly awakened power flared instinctively, illuminating the chamber with golden light. "No," Carl breathed, staring out the shattered window. "That's impossible." A horn blared across the citadel, then another, then dozens, the alarm spreading like wildfire. They ran to the balcony. Below, the citadel grounds were chaos, guards scrambling, nobles screaming, and at the gates, Alexa's breath caught. Hundreds of wolves poured through the entrance, but they weren't wolves anymore. Their eyes were empty, black voids, their mouths frozen in silent screams, their bodies wrapped in writhing shadows. They moved in perfect synchronization, a mindless army with only one purpose: destroy. "Shadow souls," Carl's voice was hollow. "Corrupted wolves. But once they're turned, there's no saving them." "Your Majesty!" Alpha Garrett burst onto the balcony, his face pale. "It's Baron Silas. He's at the northern tower with some kind of weapon." Carl was already moving. "Alexa, stay here." "Absolutely not." She grabbed his arm, her eyes blazing gold. "I'm not hiding while you fight." His jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Then stay close." They raced through corridors filled with panicked servants and wounded guards. The sounds of battle grew louder. Screams, the clash of steel, the wet sounds of tearing flesh. They burst onto the northern tower to find Baron Silas standing before a massive obsidian obelisk, his hands pressed against its surface. Dark energy pulsed from the relic in waves, and Alexa could feel it. Her own power, the energy that had been drained from her for 12 years, twisted and corrupted, and feeding this monstrosity. "The Eclipse relic," Silas laughed, his eyes black with madness. "Built with your stolen light, little Garcia. Every drop of power we took from you, stored and perverted. And now," his grin widened, "now it births an army that will consume everything you love." Carl's snarl was inhuman. He launched himself at Silas, moving faster than Alexa could track. But Silas was ready. He pulled a blade from the obelisk, a sword made of solidified shadow, dripping with corruption. "This blade was forged to kill solar walkers," Silas said, his voice echoing with dark power. "One cut, and the poison spreads through the bond, killing both mates slowly, painfully." He swung at Alexa. Carl threw himself between them. The shadow blade punched through his chest, erupting out his back in a spray of golden blood. "No!" Alexa's scream shattered windows across the tower. Carl collapsed into her arms, his blood, so bright it hurt to look at, pouring onto the stone. His eyes were wide with shock, his breath coming in wet gasps. "Alexa!" he choked. "Run! I'm not leaving you!" Tears streamed down her face as she pressed her hands to the wound, but the shadow poison was already spreading, black veins crawling across his chest like cracks in porcelain. Silas laughed. "Watch him die, Solar Walker. Watch as the poison spreads through your bond and claims you both. You have maybe an hour before—" Alexa looked up at him, and her eyes were no longer gold. They were white, pure, burning white like the heart of a star. "You used my power to forge that weapon," she whispered, her voice resonating with terrible power. "Which means I can unmake it." Her hands left Carl's wound and rose toward the Eclipse relic. The obelisk began to crack. Silas's laughter died. "Wait, what are you—" "I'm taking back what you stole." The Eclipse relic exploded, and every shadow soul within 100 miles collapsed, screaming, as Alexa ripped her corrupted power out of their bodies and pulled it back into herself. But Carl was still dying, the shadow poison spreading toward his heart. And Alexa realized with crushing horror that she didn't know how to save him. Chapter 9. Carl's heartbeat stuttered beneath Alexa's palms. The black veins had reached his throat, crawling toward his jaw like poisoned roots. "Stay with me," she begged, her tears falling onto his chest. "Please, Carl." "Alexa." His voice was barely a whisper. "You need to run. I'm not running anymore." The words came out stronger than she felt, but as she said them, something shifted inside her chest. The fear that had controlled her entire life. Fear of her power, fear of being seen, fear of mattering. It cracked. She looked down at Carl, this man who had fallen to his knees for her, who had offered his throat, who was dying because he'd thrown himself between her and a blade. No more running. Alexa closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, past the reclaimed power from the Eclipse relic, past the newly awakened Solar Walker strength, down to something older. Something that existed before bloodlines and binding runes and stolen destinies, the core of the sun itself. "What are you doing?" Silas stumbled backward, his face pale. "Oh, stop, you can't watch me." Alexa's body erupted into flame, not the golden fire from before. This was white-hot, incandescent, pure solar energy that burned away shadow and corruption and death itself. Her skin became translucent, glowing from within, her bones visible as light instead of matter. The solar trance. The state where a solar walker stopped being merely powerful and became a conduit for the sun's heart. Above them, the eclipsed sky began to crack. Light, true sunlight, poured through the fissures in the darkness like blood from a wound. The black fire consuming the borders flickered and died. The remaining shadow souls across the citadel shrieked as the corruption burned out of their bodies, leaving them collapsed but alive. Alexa rose into the air, Carl still cradled in her arms, her body now a pillar of living flame. "No!" Silas raised his hands, dark magic gathering. "I won't let you." She looked at him. The shadow magic in his veins ignited. Silas screamed as his body turned to ash from the inside out, disintegrating in seconds. Around the citadel, every dark relic he'd planted, every cursed stone, every corrupted talisman exploded into harmless dust. But Carl was still dying. Alexa descended back to the tower, laying him gently on the stone. The shadow poison had reached his heart now, turning his golden blood black. "Please," she whispered, pressing her burning hands to his chest. "Please work." Solar fire poured from her palms into his wound. The shadow poison recoiled, hissing, fighting back. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then Carl gasped. The black veins reversed, retreating from his heart, burning away under Alexa's touch. A colour flooded back into his face. His eyes flew open, glowing pure gold. "Alexa!" He reached up, his hand cupping her face despite the flames. "You did it! You—" His words cut off. His body went rigid, his back arching. "Carl!" Panic seized her. "What's wrong?" He screamed. Not in pain, in power. The mark she'd left on his throat blazed like a brand. Golden light erupted from his body, matching her own, their powers intertwining and amplifying until Alexa couldn't tell where she ended, and he began. "What's happening?" she gasped. Grand Physician Corwin appeared in the tower doorway, his milky eyes wide with shock. "The supernova bond," he breathed, "when a solar walker fully awakens in the presence of her marked mate. The bond doesn't just connect them, it transforms him too." His voice shook. "Your Majesty isn't just an Alpha King anymore." Carl rose to his feet, his entire body wreathed in solar fire, his eyes burning white gold. "Then what is he?" Alexa whispered. Before Corwin could answer, the sky split open. Not with light this time, with darkness so absolute it made the eclipse look like a candle flame. And through that darkness, riding shadow soul dragons that shouldn't exist, came an army. At their head was a figure in black armor, her mismatched eyes, one gold, one black, fixed on Alexa with predatory hunger. Lady Morgana smiled. "Round one is over, little son." Her voice echoed across the citadel. "Now the real war begins." Chapter 10. Shadow soul dragons filled the sky, their wings blotting out the sun Alexa had just reclaimed. Hundreds of them, each carrying warriors in black armor, descending toward the citadel like a plague of darkness. Morgana's laughter echoed across the tower. "Did you think destroying one relic would save you? I've been planning this for 200 years, little son. Ever since my ancestors slaughtered the last solar walker. Or so we thought." Carl moved to stand beside Alexa, his body still burning with their shared power. "You're not taking her." "I don't need to take her." Morgana's smile was terrible. "I just need to watch her burn herself out, trying to save everyone. Solar walkers are so predictable, all that power, all that light, and all of it wasted on caring." She raised her hand, and the dragon army dove. Alexa felt Carl's hand find hers, their fingers interlacing. Through their bond, she could feel his absolute trust, his unwavering faith that she could do this. "Together?" he asked quietly. "Together." They rose into the air as one, twin pillars of solar fire, and met the dragon army head-on. The battle was chaos and light and screaming shadow. Alexa's power poured from her in waves, each blast of solar fire incinerating corrupted dragons and burning the darkness from their riders. But for every enemy she destroyed, 2 more appeared. The citadel below was in flames, wolves fighting desperately against the Shadow Soul warriors who had landed in the courtyards. "There's too many!" Carl shouted, blasting apart 3 dragons with a single strike. His power was immense now, amplified by their bond. But even he couldn't be everywhere at once. Alexa looked down and saw Nina, her friend, her only kindness in those dark years, cornered by 5 Shadow Soul warriors. Saw Grand Physician Corwin trying to shield wounded guards with his body. Saw Alpha Garrett fighting desperately to protect a group of terrified children. Saw her people dying. No. Something crystallized in Alexa's mind. She'd spent her entire life being drained, her power stolen to fuel others' greed. But power wasn't meant to be hoarded. It was meant to be shared. "Carl," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Trust me. Always." Alexa stopped fighting. She simply hung in the air, closed her eyes, and let go. Her power exploded outward, not as an attack, but as pure, undiluted sunlight. It flooded through the citadel, through every courtyard and corridor and chamber, reaching every single wolf in the compound. And as it touched them, it didn't burn. It healed. It empowered. It transformed. Nina gasped as golden light erupted from her body, her eyes blazing as power she'd never possessed flooded her veins. She moved like lightning, her newfound strength letting her tear through the Shadow Soul warriors with ease. Corwin's healing magic amplified 100-fold. The wounded guards he was shielding began to rise, their injuries sealing, their bodies burning with borrowed solar fire. Alpha Garrett roared, his wolf form erupting with golden flames, growing to twice its normal size as Alexa's power merged with his own. All across the citadel, wolves were transforming, not into shadow souls, but into something new. Something brilliant and terrible, and hers, an army of light. "Impossible!" Morgana shrieked. "Solar walkers can't. You shouldn't be able to share your power." "You're right." Alexa opened her eyes, and they were twin suns. Solar walkers couldn't. But I'm not just a solar walker anymore. She could feel it now, the change Carl's transformation had triggered in her. When she'd marked him, when their bond had evolved into the supernova bond, it hadn't just changed him. It had unlocked something in her that no solar walker had ever possessed. The ability to create instead of just destroy. To share instead of just consume. To build an army of light instead of standing alone against the darkness. "I'm a solar queen," Alexa said, her voice resonating with absolute authority. "And you're in my kingdom." She raised her hand, and every wolf she'd empowered raised theirs with her, hundreds of voices speaking as one. "Burn!" The combined blast of solar fire was apocalyptic. It consumed Morgana's dragon army in seconds, turning shadow to ash to nothing. The corrupted warriors fell from the sky, their darkness purged, their bodies collapsing but alive, freed from their corruption, just as the earlier shadow souls had been. Only Morgana remained, hovering in the air, her mismatched eyes wide with something that might have been fear. "This isn't over," she snarled. "I'll return. I'll find a way to—" "No!" Carl's voice cut through her threats. "You won't." He moved faster than shadow, his hand closing around Morgana's throat. The solar fire burning through his veins ignited the darkness inside her. She screamed, writhing, and for a moment Alexa thought Carl would kill her. Then he pulled back his hand, and Morgana collapsed, gasping. "I'm not executing you," Carl said coldly. "I'm giving you a choice. Live the rest of your immortal life as a powerless human, stripped of your magic and your ability to harm anyone ever again. Or die here, now, and be forgotten." Morgana's face twisted with rage and humiliation, but she could feel it, her power draining away, burned out by Carl's solar-infused touch. She fell from the sky, caught by guards who bound her in silver chains. "Take her to the dungeons," Carl commanded. "She'll stand the trial for her crimes." The battle was over. Alexa descended slowly, her feet touching stone. The moment they did, her knees buckled. Carl caught her, cradling her against his chest as exhaustion crashed over her in waves. "The wounded," she gasped. "I need to—" "You've done enough." Carl's voice was gentle but firm. "Rest now. Let me handle the rest." "But—" "Alexa!" He tilted her face up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You just saved an entire kingdom. You shared your power with hundreds of wolves, destroyed an army, and purged the shadow corruption from every infected soul in the citadel. You're allowed to rest." Tears burned behind her eyes. "People are hurt because of me. Because Morgana wanted. People are alive because of you." Carl pressed his forehead to hers. Every single person in this citadel would be dead or corrupted if you hadn't awakened, if you hadn't fought, if you hadn't been brave enough to share your light instead of hiding it. Alexa let herself sink into his arms, let herself believe his words. Around them, the citadel was coming back to life. Guards were helping the freed Shadow Soul warriors to their feet. Healers were moving through the courtyards, tending to the injured. And everywhere, wolves were glowing with residual solar fire, with their faces turned toward Alexa with awe and gratitude. "They're looking at you like you're a goddess," Carl murmured. "I'm not. You're their queen." His arms tightened. "My queen, and I am so unbearably proud of you." The next 3 days passed in a blur. Alexa moved through the citadel, using the last reserves of her power to heal the most critically wounded. Nina stayed at her side constantly, her borrowed power making her faster and stronger than any normal wolf, a permanent gift from Alexa's sharing. Grand Physician Corwin discovered that every wolf Alexa had empowered during the battle retained a fraction of her light, not enough to burn like a solar walker, but enough to resist shadow corruption, to heal faster, to be stronger. "You've changed the very nature of our species," Corwin said, his voice filled with wonder. "Every wolf you touched, they can now pass this resistance to their children. In a few generations, shadow corruption might be impossible." Alpha Garrett and the other territorial leaders came to kneel before her, one by one, offering their allegiance not just to Carl, but to her specifically. The Council of Alphas, the same wolves who had questioned her worth just days ago, now couldn't meet her eyes without trembling. On the 4th day, Carl dissolved the Iron Claw Pack officially. Their lands were redistributed to smaller packs who had been oppressed for years. Every wolf who had served under Darius willingly was given a choice: swear allegiance to the crown and be marked with Alexa's light as proof of their redemption, or be exiled beyond the 5 territories forever. Most chose redemption. Madame Greaves was tried and executed for her role in the murder of Alexa's father. Alexa didn't attend. She couldn't bring herself to watch, even after everything her stepmother had done. But she visited her father's grave afterward, placing moonflowers on the stone, and finally, saying goodbye. And then came the coronation. The ceremony was held at dawn in the Grand Plaza, where thousands of wolves gathered to witness. Alexa stood before the assembled crowd in a gown of white and gold, her hair crowned with sunlight that needed no metal or jewels. Carl knelt before her first, a reversal of tradition that shocked gasps through the crowd. "I, Carl M. Hayes, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, pledge myself to Alexa D. Garcia, Solar Queen, last of the Solar Walker bloodline and savior of our people." His voice rang out clear and strong. "I offer her my crown, my kingdom, and my eternal devotion. From this day forward, we rule as equals, as partners, as mates." He held up his crown, the ancient circlet of black iron and moonstone, and placed it at her feet. Alexa's hands trembled as she lifted it, but Carl's eyes held hers, steady and sure. She placed the crown back on his head, then touched her palm to his cheek. "I accept your pledge, Carl M. Hayes, and I offer mine in return." Her voice strengthened as she spoke, power thrumming beneath the words. "I will stand beside you, not as a servant, not as property, not as a prize to be won, but as your equal, your partner, your mate and queen." Golden light flared between them, their bond visible to everyone gathered, but pulsing with power and devotion and unshakable trust. The crowd erupted in cheers that shook the very stones of the citadel. Elder Moira, who had survived the battle and been pardoned for her earlier compliance, stepped forward with a second crown. This one was new, forged in the 3 days since the battle from the melted remains of the Eclipse relic. Corrupted metal purified and reshaped into something beautiful. "For the Solar Queen," Moira said, her voice thick with emotion, "may your light never dim. May your reign bring dawn to the darkest places. May you never forget that you rose from shadows to become the sun itself." Carl took the crown, a circlet of gold and crystal that seemed to hold captured sunlight, and placed it gently on Alexa's head. The moment it touched her, the sun blazed brighter overhead, as if acknowledging its queen. Alexa turned to face her people, these wolves who had ignored her, who had looked through her, who had let her suffer in silence. And now they knelt before her as one, their faces upturned, their eyes bright with tears and hope and fierce loyalty. "Rise," she said softly. They obeyed. "I'm not a perfect queen. I'm not even a perfect person," Alexa's voice carried across the plaza. "But I promise you this. I will never let anyone suffer in silence the way I did. I will never turn away from those who are hurting. And I will burn myself to ash before I let the darkness take anyone under my protection." The cheers were deafening. Carl's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing, and Alexa felt their bond pulse with warmth and love and home. The celebration lasted 3 days, and the citadel transformed from a place of war into a place of joy, music and dancing and feasting that spilled through every corridor and courtyard. Nina was named Royal Guard Captain, the first Omega to ever hold the position. Corwin became Grand Healer of the realm. Even Alpha Garrett, who had once questioned Alexa's worth, swore an oath to protect her with his life. On the final night of celebration, Carl led Alexa to the highest tower, the same place where she'd first awakened in silk sheets, where he'd stood at the edge of her bed and changed her life forever. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. Alexa opened it to find a ring, simple silver with a single moonstone that glowed with inner light. "It was my mother's," Carl said quietly. "She died when I was young, but she told me to give this to my mate when I found her. To the woman who would stand beside me, not because of my crown, but despite it." Tears blurred Alexa's vision. "Carl, you've already marked me, already bound yourself to me, already claimed me before the entire kingdom." He took the ring and slid it onto her finger. "But I wanted you to have something that wasn't about duty or destiny or ancient bonds. Something that was just mine to yours. A promise that I choose you, every day, in every life, forever." Alexa threw her arms around his neck, and Carl caught her, spinning them both as she laughed through her tears. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "My king, my mate, my everything." "I love you," he whispered back. "My queen, my light, my home." They kissed on that tower as the sun set, and the first stars appeared, to two souls who had found each other in darkness and created light. Below them, the kingdom celebrated. Above them, the stars shone bright, and in the space between, Alexa D. Garcia, once a servant, once invisible, once nothing, stood as queen beside the man who had caught her when she fell and refused to let go. The darkness was gone, the war was won, and the dawn of a new era had begun. Thank you so much for joining me on Alexa and Carl's journey from darkness into light. If you enjoyed this tale of the servant who became a solar queen and the Alpha King who refused to let her go, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Your likes and subscriptions help me bring you more epic werewolf romance stories filled with powerful mates, heart-stopping moments, and the kind of love that can literally set the world on fire. Drop a comment below and let me know. What was your favorite moment? Was it when Carl caught Alexa at the ceremony? When she unleashed her solar walker power? Or when they finally stood together as king and queen? Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the next dramatic, swoon-worthy story. Until next time, may you find your own mate who would burn the world to keep you safe.